Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we are going to talk about the Finders. This is part 6 of our continued investigation into the Finders cult. If you are just seeing this video first, please go back and watch the first 5 videos because this will make a lot more sense. I want to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com so you can make sure to see all of our latest content, including investigation into the Finders, our investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, our research on 5G technology, other interviews and podcasts and things like that. Also sign up for our email newsletter right here, which I send out every Saturday or Sunday. Right to your email inbox, you get all of our latest content. So go ahead and do that. Alright, so we've covered a lot of ground now over the last 6 weeks going into the Finders, and we're just about, I'd say at most, a week and a half, 2 weeks tops from the release of the Finders. It will be out by December 31st, I promise. If not sooner, hopefully sooner, but I'm patiently waiting while Jeremy does the editing, and I should be seeing a rough draft this weekend, and I expect the final copy shortly after that, so we're excited to see that. But we've covered the timeline, we've covered the known documentation, we've covered details on Marion Petty, the founder of the Finders, we've looked at intelligence connections. Last week we examined potential people to interview and members of the Finders and some of their background history. And now I want to show you some of the rest of what I have in this document here, this folder, which will be made publicly available once the documentary is released. A couple of things I want to show you here related to this. I'll show you my script first of all. These are documents I've shown you. So this is the script to what I'm calling Who Will Find What the Finders Hide. And as I told you guys, there will be probably one more Finders investigation video, which will be bonus content just for Patreon supporters, and I'll tell you the rest to you guys later on because it's not that important, but it's just a little bonus video on where the name comes from because I think some of you guys will be interested in that rabbit hole, and it does point to some interesting aspects of the Finders documentary investigation. So this is the script though that I put together. This is about 20,000 words, about 20,000 words I think. And which is, sort of a short book here. It comes out to about 30 minutes of information, and the copy that you guys will have access to will have all the links to everything that I'm referring to. It'll link to all the documents. It'll really break down everything that was seen in the Finders. We look at just every aspect of it, and this is really just going to be, I think, the most in-depth presentation on the Finders themselves and what I have found. You can kind of see my flow here. This is the part 1, which will be coming out, as I said, in the next 2 weeks or so. And this was just a working title, Who Are the Finders? Part 1, intro to the whole thing. The Finders arrested in Florida, telling the story, documenting the Finders, getting deeper into the documents that exist, then bringing it back to the 1993 DOJ investigation. Then we look at the State Department and FBI files, and then it wraps up. Part 2, which will be out in January. This is the actual kind of digging and investigation. Who is Marion Petty? And I look into just everything about Marion Petty, the founder of the Finders, and his connections to intelligence. And we look at intelligence connections, and I have Toby Terrell, the interview with the man who was known as the spokesman of the Finders, who is Petty's right-hand man, who is still alive today. And I was able to sit down and do an interview with him, so that'll be in part 2. Get into further notes on Petty and some of the other Finders, including Kristen Noth, who is the woman we talked about in the last video, who has some intelligence connections. And then we'll look at the child trafficking claims, and I'm going to use some footage from Toby Terrell's interview. And I also might use some additional. I was contacted recently. I've been contacted by a lot of people regarding the Finders information, and lots of you guys are giving me some different things to go on. Some that may be useful at this moment, others that might not be useful just at this present moment, but I appreciate everybody who's sending me information, and feel free to continue doing so if you have something to share. So what I'm getting at though is that some people have sent me information, and I think that it's valuable, but I haven't found anything that is swaying me from what I've already found on my own, or making me think that there's nothing here. Then we'll have a conclusion where I really lay out what has been found. And I'll just show you guys a little bit of, these are additional details that I just made notes of. Tallahassee police reports on page 41 and 42. There's a discussion of tunnels underneath the warehouse in D.C., which is kind of interesting, and I do talk about that in the documentary. And this, if you know anything about some of the other scandals involving trafficking and networks of potential pedophilia, like from the 80s. There's, like I can't remember the name of that daycare center, but they found tunnels underneath that daycare center, and there were tunnels here under this warehouse in DC, so that's kind of an interesting aspect. Page 56 and 57 describe the computers. Then also there's information indicating that 48 Hours was apparently going to do a special about the finders, but for some reason it never happened, and they actually were contacted by the producers talking about doing an episode, and somebody made them back out. Don't know how, don't know why. Then this memo here I have from the FBI file. It just details the original founders of the finders, who are Diane Sherwood and Barbara Sylvester. That's just kind of an interesting note I made. The execution of Henrietta and Igor is the photo album that contained the pictures of goats being slaughtered and, just the things that were described as satanic, but that the group described as just, teaching them where meat comes from. And interesting note here that one of the Washington Post articles mentions that the men and women live separately, and that the men live at the warehouse where the women live at the apartment building in D.C., which I thought was interesting because it could be plausible then, if you know that they're living together, that the women and the men don't exactly know what's going on in each other's living arrangements. So maybe there are some things that escaped their knowledge, just because one of them's like, no, I never seen this. Well, if they're not even living together, perhaps that could indicate why they would know different things. This is a copy of Washington's Free Weekly, a weekly paper from 1998, the city paper. And you can see the front page is In Search of the Finders. They had a pretty in-depth article in here about the finders, and you can find a copy of this online, but this is the actual physical copy. And it's got some details here. There's some of the cops investigating from Tallahassee. This is Myers Park, where the kids were originally found. And there's the two men right there. We actually have a picture of them. After 41 days in jail, all charges get dropped against Michael Howell and Ammerman right there. There's the finders, the two men who were caught with the 6 children at a park and were accused of all kinds of things and claim that they never did anything, and still say that there was nothing untoward done to the kids, and it was just all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by the media. And yeah, so there's just some original documentation of articles related to that. And I also have, let me go back further, I also have a 1993 U.S. News and World Report physical article. This is one that was widely cited. This is from 1993, once the DOJ investigation started to kind of ramp back up and they started to talk about the finders again. And this is an old picture. It says DC police seize evidence, and it's really hard to see there, but it looks like if somebody could clean that up, that's like a picture of a cop probably at the warehouse, and maybe I could find that picture right there. James A. Parcel, the Washington Post. There might be an original copy of that, and it looks like that's a cop walking out of the warehouse with bags of evidence. Kind of interesting. And yeah, so this is just all the different pages of the article itself that were scanned. I can't remember where these were found. I think these were in the FBI files. They actually, the FBI was looking into it. And this is by another journalist named Wendell Minnick, who is apparently the man who some say has done the most research on the finders more than anybody. I mean, I don't want to steal the claim I have more knowledge than this guy, because apparently he said he looked into it for 2 years and ended up finding nothing. That the finders would like you to believe that there's things going on with them, that they are this crazy group, but that in reality they are not. So we'll see what I come up with. And here's what I think was going to be probably one of the big highlights of the documentary of part 2. Part 1 is definitely going to be explosive because it's got new information, it's got original information, it's going to be well produced and concise, and the most well put together documentary on the finders that's out there, more than these 3-minute little pieces that kind of just reassess what we already know. Part 2 will include this interview right here with the spokesman of the finders named Robert Terrell, Toby, also known as Genghis Plato, and he used other aliases. And I talked with him for about an hour, and this full interview will be available to our Patreon supporters very shortly, probably after part 1 comes out. But pieces of it will make it into the documentary, the relevant pieces to tell that story in the script that I was showing you guys. So that's Nobody has seen this footage other than, well, me and a couple of people who are involved with the production of this. So I'm excited to share with the world what we found with somebody, not just somebody who was in the finders, because this is the thing. There are various people who have been in the finders, right, and who can claim, well, they knew Petty, but perhaps they weren't part of his inner circle. Perhaps they weren't, because there was, just by all accounts, by different people involved, there was an inner circle of people who were really close to Petty and worked directly with him, and some of them worked with him, for 20 plus years up until the time of his death. Robert Terrell worked with him directly for 25 years. So he has quite, the interesting view on Petty, and he also claims that nothing happened, though, of course, that this is all a misunderstanding. But what he does reveal, I think, is really interesting. And of course, I let the viewer decide who they want to believe and what version of events they think is factual and was the one that actually happened. So that, my friends, is all of the information saved from maybe one or two pieces on another computer, another drive, that I've compiled on the finders. And all of these different things, all these links, if I take you back to the original timeline of events here, you'll remember that I have all of these various links to go through back to the first page. I have every single article on the finders going up till 2017, and various loose links on the finders related to forum discussions and just lots of details. So there's a whole lot to go through here, and I've gone through all of it, but I think I've been refreshing my mind and constantly going back and forth through it and through it again to get a handle on this, and especially as I'm making this documentary. And so more than likely, like I said, the first script for the first part of the documentary is already is about 50 pages of a book, so I might end up putting this into a physical print once it's all done, like a short book about the finders and the whole story and what we know now as of 2018 going into 2019. So let me know if you'd be interested in that. And I want to remind you guys again, if you sign up on patreon.com/Derrick Broze to support us, that's where you will make sure you get all of this content before anyone else. I really do try to make sure all of my patrons are getting the videos a day ahead of time before everyone else, especially the Finders investigation, because all of the money from this Patreon account goes directly to funding these documentaries and to paying our editor, Jeremy Martin. And I also do exclusive Patreon updates like this one I did a couple days ago. So check that out if you're interested. And I really appreciate all of your support as I try to dive down this rabbit hole, which I think is extremely important. As many of you have let me know, it's extremely important, and it connects to other pieces of the puzzle as we try to expose the shadow government, we try to expose pedophilia, and we try to expose human trafficking networks. Is the Finders a part of that? I'm getting closer to an answer, I think, and I think you guys are starting to form your own opinions. So let me know what you think below in the comments, and I will talk to you very soon. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.